Welcome, everyone. This is the Finance Committee meeting. This is Tuesday, March 11th, 2025. It's 6:33, and I'd like to call the meeting to order with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, this meeting is being recorded. This meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, GLC 30A, Section 20. And on March 29, 2023, Governor Healy signed a supplemental 2023 budget bill allowing for remote and hybrid meeting options for public bodies through March 31st, 2025. All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. The first item on our agenda tonight is we're starting to talk about the warrant articles, and it is warrant article 13, as far as I know, in the most recent and final draft, but it's the community preservation article, which I believe is Article 13. It still is, I think, in the final warrant. But so I'd like to welcome Betty Slade here, and Betty's going to talk to us about the article that's in the warrant. Hi, Betty.
Hi. So
nice to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see you too. Thank you for inviting me. I thought you forgot me.
No, never.
Glad you did, because then I had to review the article and I found an error.
I'm glad you reviewed it.
I was really happy that I found it before 3 o'clock yesterday. Anyway, so every year people come, usually nonprofits or the town, come to the CPC, the Community Preservation Committee, in order to get recommendations by the CPC to town meetings for projects which they would like to carry out. This year we had 6 applications and all were recommended to town meeting, and that's what appears on the paper here. Some of you are new. I don't know if everybody knows how CPC works, but we do have 3 basic categories. One is like a joint one: open space and recreation, community housing, and historic preservation. So if a person or group or town comes into the CPC and we determine if their project fits into the various categories, and then they give details, they come before the CPC and we ask questions, and then we have a public hearing, and at that time we recommend the projects. So this year, under open space and recreation, they're all recreation. The first, like last year, we had the Annex Park, which was submitted by the Recreation Commission, and that is completed. And that's a beautiful playground. And now they're going up to the playground near the Macomber School, which is called the Bicentennial Park Playground. And they want to do various improvements to that, which they will detail and which I also will put into the handout, which goes to town meeting, because that handout has is the law, and we have to follow what's in that handout when we approve the funding. So that is $250,000, and that's being financed by FY26 estimated fund revenues. The second project is another WYA project. Some of you know that we have been financing the WYA since 2002-03, when CPA was first adopted by Westport. They have finished the project, but they had someone come in and ask if they could put in a senior league baseball field. And the good thing about this area on American Legion is there's quite a bit of room, and it's been cleared. So when new fields are put in, it's much more reasonable. This one's going to cost about $250,000, but it will be, they've asked the CPA funding of $150,000. So it's a new baseball field with the chain link fence and the dugouts and all of that, which can be used by most anybody, and also could be helpful for the schools. The schools could also use this as a baseball field. The third is there has been for quite a while work on what we call the Westport Biking and Walking Path. It's a South Coast Northern Scenic Greenway feasibility study that they're still working on. Several towns are involved. Their CPCs are involved. And we've given them a bit of money, but not much to this. I mean, the town has given them money, but not much to date. But they asked for 12,000 more in order to complete the feasibility study. As you know, they have a Mass Trails grant, which is supporting them mainly, and other towns are supporting them. And they've asked for 12,000 for that. So that's open space and recreation. Community housing is what we do now, we've been doing for years, is to basically finance the Westport Affordable Housing Trust. I think everyone knows there is one in Westport. Their main achievement was in Okochok Village. They recently had a Habitat for Humanity duplex, and they put out an RFP trying to get land to do a 24 to 30 unit, something in Westport, which is larger than the one or two. It's very hard to find the land to do that. And once you find it, it has to have certain requirements. So they've asked for 300,000 this year, and 200,000 of it is basically for a reserve for land acquisition. I think it'll bring them up to 800,000 that they will have so that they can buy land. 60,000 is for rehab, and that's rehab of restricted housing for affordable housing to help people maintain their houses so that the affordable housing stock doesn't get depleted and fall apart. And then 40,000 is for the housing office, which includes the housing officer who, because of the regulations and the difficulties of housing, needs to have somebody specialized. Also, legal help and restrictions and various things like that. So that's community housing. The third category is historic preservation. We have two, one small, one large. Some of you, like Al, would know the Westport Grange. Its history is important in Westport. And if you go into the Grange, you'll see on the walls all these plaques from 1880, 1898 and so forth. And for years I've been saying, you've got to do something with those plaques. So they have new leadership, Barbara Smith and Cindy Wilson Smith, and they have gone through and looked at all of their records, and they have a lot of books there, and the records are not anywhere else. So going through that, they've decided that they want to get a better place for them to be. They're just in closets in the kitchen. And so they want to find better places for them, and also to put them into proper types of archival boxes, and for the things on the wall to put them in much better categories of archival paper again, and proper lights and proper mirror windows, I should say, or so that they aren't hurt by the light and various things like that. So they're asking for $8,225. They plan to do a lot of digitization other accounts, but they're going to be doing that with volunteers. And I have asked the Mormon Church, who has done a lot of our digitation, who's presently doing digitation of the records in the town vaults. And they do that free, and they give us all of the information. We sign contracts with them. The town signs contracts with them. So they may do the Grange work also for them. The last project is a large project. It's from the Westport Point United Methodist Church. They want to preserve and rehabilitate Hallen Hall Community Center. The community center was built in 1967, so it is not old, but it is over 50 years old, which is helpful, makes it more historic. And it's been used by the public, almost completely by the public, people from all over Westport, including as a school for third to fifth grade in 1973, when there were problems with the school system. So they have several phases that they are going to do, and they're asking for CPA funding for the first phase. And the first phase is the exterior, is to restore the exterior, which of course is the siding and the windows and all of that. And the second part of phase one is for handicapped accessibility. CPA funding can be used for rehabilitation, for historic buildings, and one of them is, of course, handicapped accessibility. So that there's two parts to phase one, and that's all they're going to ask from CPA. The rest, they're planning on raising funds, getting grants and so forth, and they've already begun to do that. So that's $298,000. And if you notice, that's being funded by both the estimated fund revenues and historic preservation reserves. That's where my mistake was before. I put it all as, and I wrote it as estimated fund reserves, which was absolutely wrong. But this is now correct. And yesterday I went over it again with Nicole, and she passed it. So I was happy. We asked for $40,000 for administrative funds. It can't be over 5% of the estimated fund revenues, but we never use that much. We do it because sometimes we have to do things like have restrictions looked at to see if they're correct. Sometimes audits. Sometimes we hire specialists to help us if a project is something that we don't have the capability to do it. We're very lucky on CPC that we have a lot of capability, and each project has a liaison. So there's someone who oversees the whole projects, and in order to get paid, that person in order for the project to be paid for, that person has to approve. Hugh is one of those liaisons. And then budgeted reserves is an interesting category. All it means that we haven't used up all the estimated fund revenues, but in order to utilize during the year, we need to reserve it. So budget reserves is kind of part of the leftover that we haven't used for projects during the year. We don't use all of what's left over because we're not sure for sure that we'll get the estimated fund revenues that we expected. So we're a little cautious. So they are the projects for this year, which we will submit to town meeting. We will do for the private projects, we're going to be asking for, they have to do grant agreements so that the projects are protected. And for other projects that have special categories, we do, as I said, surveys, or we do analysis. And that will all be put into the handout at town meeting. So that's this year.
Thank you for that, Betty. I was going to turn it over to Hugh if he had any comments, but it looks like Hugh already had his hand up. So
Yep.
go ahead.
That's a thank you. Not a great deal. I'm just going to add to the WIWA. Probably everybody in the committee knows, but it still bears re-saying. The guys who were working on this started working. They have a baseball place for their children. They're now working for their grandchildren. But it's done, and it's beautiful. If you ever go out there, it's still somewhat closed off from the public for fear of vandalism, that sort of thing. But over time, it will be in operation, and the place is just gorgeous when you go out there. So it's a real resource for the town. The only other comment I'd make was in connection with the Point Church, that there was something we had to investigate to see whether it was possible or not. The rules have changed in the last 10 years. And more recently, there was a court case that said you can't use CPC money for religious properties. Well, that doesn't really answer the question, because there's a very big distinction or classification of what is religious and what is not. In this case, it's basically a meeting hall. And we concluded, and with, I believe, a consultation with town council, that it's okay. We think it's okay. Somebody may challenge it. There may be a difference of opinion. But we did consider the question and came to the conclusion we could go ahead with it.
Could I add to that is that in 2018, the Supreme Court of Massachusetts looked at one particular project. It was stained glass windows with religious symbols on them. And they invoked the anti-aid amendment and said that this was not eligible. And people immediately jumped to the conclusion, oh dear, you can't do anything with churches. However, since then, over 200 projects and churches have been passed by town meeting and have been done, and there hasn't been any question about them. I'd like to say in this particular case, we were asked to do specific things, Hugh, as you know. We were asked, first of all, that we would have to do a grant agreement. We always do a grant agreement. Secondly, we had to have special letters from the Historical Commission saying that this project was significant in their viewpoint. We have 2 such letters. We also are in the historic district. This is in the historic district, so they're already quite restricted as to what they can do. So the Historical Commission will keep track of that. And these were recommendations by Mr. Smerge, the lawyer. And he said if you had these things, that you were in pretty good shape. Alice.
Thank you both. Anything else from you, Hugh?
No, but I think Al has a question.
Yep, absolutely. Just wanted to make sure you're all set. Go ahead, Al. Al, you're muted.
Here, let's try that. That
go.
sounds better. One comment and one question. And neither are negative in any sense of the word. I happen to be around when Dick Dean, who was the minister at the time, got together and a group together to build the Howland Hall. It was never a religious site, if you will. It was attached to the church, of course, but it was a community hall. It has a kitchen. It had, yes, I will admit that there were offices and some Sunday school that morphed out of the underside of the main church and whatever, but the primary focus was not that. So, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't believe in any sense of the word that it violates the church and state issue at all. So that would be great. The comment that I have, Betty and Karen, or anybody else, Hugh or Karen, the housing, there was a help me with it, $40,000 or so for operating expenses, I'll
Yes.
call it. Is that really the purview of CPC to fund operating expenses? I just want more clarification on that.
That question has been asked a lot within the CPA communities, and the answer is yes. It can for housing trust, but in our grant agreement, we have to have a housing grant agreement with them, by the way. Although they're sort of town, they're autonomous, so they have to, and we can specify what they can and cannot do with that
Okay.
funding. But a housing officer is considered, as you know, affordable housing is very complicated. And even to put out the RFP is very complicated because of all the regulations involved, state regulations as well as federal, but they use both federal and state money. So the answer is yes, Al, it can.
Okay. That's fine. I wasn't pushing back on it. I was just it just jumped out at me. Yeah.
It does us too. It does us too. And so I became the liaison with the Affordable Housing Trust in order to see what they were doing, and I've attended meetings, and I'm comfortable with what they're doing. I mean, they're
Okay.
careful.
All right.
If Al's through, I'm just going to add, there was
Please do.
another project which I won't name, but we concluded was too religious and decided that it could not go ahead. It was a perfectly good idea, but because of the circumstances, we didn't think it would qualify.
But even in that case, as we've talked about, Hugh, if they came in with a better application, which we've been trying to work with them on, it's a church, and emphasize the right things, because they just answered the question so wrong at the meeting that it was just.
Well, there is another year next year.
But they're adjusting, and we'll see if they ever come back. But remember, the only real question I've ever seen at the town meeting was about, I don't know if you remember, Al, through Karen, there at the meeting house, there was a project to paint it, and two people stood up and said that is against the separation of church and state. And that was the only time I had ever seen a question on that issue. But it again wasn't challenged after that.
Right.
Go ahead, Cindy.
I think for purposes of our audience as well as my own edification, how much in total do you collect per year? And just to give our audience that may be listening, which I hope they are, they'll tune into this at some point, just to remind everyone the source of the funding. This is the amount that's attached to your tax bill, but just so people realize that this is not tax funds per se, but this is the assessment that comes on your tax bill, and this is how it's utilized. I mean, I think all of us here understand that, but I think it'd be good for the audience.
Yes. Well, there's a 2% surcharge on people's tax bill. So it's 2% of your bill, not 2% of the value of your house. So that is the estimated FY26 real estate tax revenues. There's also a state match. In the beginning, the match was 100%. But so many large cities joined, like Boston and Fall River and New Bedford and so on, that our match has become lower. So that's the second category. The third is interest. The funds remain available if you don't use them for the next year. So we have reserves right now. We have reserves of $1 million. I'm utilizing some of them this year, but our total available funds for FY26 are $2,033,654.
So you collect about $1 million a year?
Well, it's beginning to get that way as it's going. It depends. It's grown as
More or less.
revenues have grown, but it's about $1 million a year.
Okay.
And this year we're allocating about 1.2 billion, and so we're using reserves.
Okay.
And the reserves are allocated to, if I don't know if you look at it, but there's open space reserves, community housing reserves, etc. Because every year 10% of the estimated revenues have to go to those three categories, so 30%. And if they don't, if you notice in the previous years, we have historic preservation reserves, etc. This year we don't, because we've used all revenues as a project. So if you don't put it in a project, it has to be accumulated. Plus, many projects don't use the full funding. And so we call it sweeping. We sweep it back into the category from which it was taken. So we have actually 5 different categories of reserves, including budgeted reserves. So,
And unlike most other items from town meeting floor that get voted on, anything that's voted out of the reserves is available immediately. Is that correct?
correct.
Right.
Correct.
So they don't have to wait until July 1st.
No,
It's available immediately. If it comes from reserve.
theoretically it is.
Yeah.
It takes a little while before we can get it.
Sure.
But
Sure.
it's theoretically, and I used to really be careful when I did this, that I knew projects had they need to do them right away because it's the summer, they're ready,
Right.
But they still couldn't get them right away, so we don't do it that way anymore.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Betty. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add to what Betty said. The state contributes from registry fees and also from appropriations from the legislature. And registry fees depend upon the real estate market, as you would guess. And the amount from the legislature depends upon their mood of the moment. But that's where the matching funds come from, is those sources, in addition to the surtax on our local tax bills.
Right. Right. And you all know that we had a vote, Karen, in town on whether or not to retain. It was just a question of getting people's opinion rather than, it had to happen, and CPA prevailed at a vote, at a ballot. So the second time. So, okay. So thank you.
When was that, Betty?
2014, 2015,
Okay.
something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
It was after the handy house.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Christopher, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My question is I just want to clarify the total amount of reserves that is available on combining all the categories.
$1,034,814 and 44 cents. I could give you this. I have a table here that I prepare every year. I don't give it to anybody but CPC, but I could give it to you. So you can see it.
I would be curious. I guess I'm also curious of the year-to-year fluctuation of that reserve. If that reserve has been that robust for a while. I'm just a little curious about that.
We have it all. I have all those data. You know where, if you go to the Community Preservation Coalition website, everything and more than what you want to know is there. For every single town, every project, every penny. So that you can get that, and goes all the way back for us to when we started CPA in Westport.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Al, you have your hand up.
I just wanted to give a shout out to CPC. There's a lot of people that question the need for the money, the need for the takeout, and where does it go, and on and on. There are a lot of projects in the town. The roof at the Earl School is just one example of many. We're not talking about private organizations here, but things that don't need to come out of the budget, of the operating budget, that are funding these things. And so I don't want to belabor the point. I just want to put it on the record that this, as far as I'm concerned, is a valuable resource for not only the character and the fabric of the town in general, but also from the specific needs of the town that eases the budget a little bit. So, enough said. Just
But
want to make that point.
I mean, just think about the playground. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
if the town had to pay for the playground, for example,
course.
I mean,
$500,
Right.
$600.
yeah, exactly.
I might say, to follow up, Al, on the web page of the town website, the CPC, I've got 3 tables. One of them shows all of everything that CPA has done with the land trust or privately, et cetera, for purchase of restrictions on land, either for farms or just for conservation. So all the details are there, how much state help there was, et cetera. That's one table. The other table, I have got all of the projects allocated by categories like town projects, you know, or
Okay.
farms, or historic preservation, et cetera. So all of the details are there.
Right.
Of everything that CPC has done. And it's amazing. I mean, that people really benefit from. I mean, I believe WYA is one huge one, but I also believe saving the 6 farms is great, you know, and things like that. So there's a lot, and the town, we've allocated quite a bit of funding to the town. The roof of the town hall, as you know, is slate. And
Right.
that was a major undertaking in the sense that we didn't know what we were doing, people. So we had to hire someone, a professional, to come in. And a really great project that how CPA can save money. This to me was fascinating. That there was problems opening the doors of the safes in town hall.
Yeah.
They couldn't open it. So they called somebody to come in, and he gave an estimate of hundreds of thousands of dollars to redo all of those. And so I said, wait a minute. And we went to the North Bennett School.
Mhm.
The North Bennett School has a section that's locksmithing. I don't know if you know about it, but look it up if you don't. The North Bennett School in Boston. A man came down, he looked around, and he said, I think it'll cost you $1,500. And he said, there's nothing wrong with the safes. The problem is the floor. It's risen up, etc. And he said all the things he needed to do, and he did it, and it saved that much. And he also said to me, I don't know if I should say in public, but I will. He was in the basement and he looked at that safe that's sitting there. Do you know there's a green safe standing? He said, that's very valuable if you ever want to sell it. So you get a lot of, a lot of people that we have brought in to look at this, for example, to look at the say the vault in the town hall. There's one in the basement, and all of the papers are there. I mean, that's where I got the 1787 first books of the town. And so we measured the humidity in there, and it's really good, by the way. But we also learned that the paper that is on some of those early books is old wallpaper, and it's very valuable. So I mean, just the interesting things that you find when you try to do these projects, and how helpful people can be. Volunteers. We call this the cornstalk. We put in the seed, and then people come with the volunteers. So much work is volunteer work in town.
Yeah. Karen, flatter me for 2 seconds. Betty, I just wanted to give to you that Russ Hart's father-in-law was the clerk of the works on the town hall, if you didn't know that, back in the 30s.
Yes.
Okay, we can do this offline. I just
his name was Jensen. He was the foreman, and that was the
Hanson
CCC project. Yes. Or
It was a CC. He was from Denmark, so we don't need to deal with this right now. But I just wanted to toss that out at you.
Well, while we're on this, I want to add a commercial for the North Bennett Street School, is what his name is. And because it is basically a vocational high school for artisans, if you will, locksmiths, iron makers, jewelry makers, all kinds of fascinating things. So if you have something strange that you need some help with, they are very good and very helpful.
Believe it or not, I worked there in my younger day. I lived in the North End, and that was my voting district too. So I'm
really
familiar with that school.
Wonderful. It's a wonderful place.
And you may, I guess, for my other hat, we've had some dealings with. It's very
Well,
pleasant.
anyway, I think we need to wrap up our CPC. So thank you, Betty, and
Thank you.
all your volunteers for everything you do. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Okay. So our next item on the agenda was to discuss the town warrant. At last night's select board meeting, I believe they did close the warrant. I don't have the final warrant, so we're still working on the draft from 2 weeks ago, but I do not believe they added any additional articles. Cindy, I think you watched the meeting last night. I don't think they added anything new, right?
They did not. They closed the warrant, and the select board reserved some time, excuse me, in future meetings for them to go through the articles for their recommendations themselves.
Right.
So it's pretty much done.
Yep. Okay.
There were no petition articles other than a couple of the streets.
Right. So everyone should have a draft. The draft was dated February 24th. It was distributed for last week's meeting, that we all have that. And I wanted us to just talk about any other presentations that we feel that we may need to line up. There does not appear to be an extensive warrant this year with a lot of financial things. So we just did I can share the screen if I need to. Does anyone want me to do that? To go through it really quick, or does everyone have it handle on it?
I have my copy.
Yeah.
We good?
Okay, good. So the earlier articles are the ones that have financial interest. So Article 1 was, and I'm reading off the index because that's quicker and easier. Article 1 was prior year bills. So of course we'll, once that's filled in, we'll we'll approve that. Probably don't need a separate presentation from that. I think Jim, we can invite the town administrator and he can walk us through any questions on many of these. Article 2 was the year-end transfers. Article 3 are salaries and compensation for elected officers. Article 4 is the town budget, which we'll talk about later. Article 5 is capital expenditures. The town administrator at the last meeting gave us the presentation on that. Article 6 is another standard to authorize the treasurer to borrow. Article 7, 8, and 9 are the budgets for the enterprise funds, the 3 in town. Article 10 is the community television budget. Article 11 is to increase the fire department revolving fund by $5,000. Article 12 is to reauthorize all of the revolving accounts. Article 13 is the community preservation, which we just had the presentation today. Article 14 is one that we should, again, Mr. Jim Hartnett can probably talk us through this. So this is the article is to increase the room occupancy tax from 4% to 6%. So we can certainly get more information and what the financial impact is on that. Articles.
I think Jim in the memo is 200,000.
I believe you're right. I believe he did indicate that. So yes, absolutely. Thank you, Hugh. Article 15 is 27,000. So it's transferring using 27,000 from the municipal waterways fund to purchase a new outboard motor. Article 16 is to transfer 60,000 from a 2021 article to use for assessor software. Article 17 is 500,000 for financing the water pollution facility projects, and that's coming through the septic revolving fund. Article 18 is $15,000 to do a hazardous waste collection, and that's coming from free cash. Article 19 is $25,000 from the receipts reserve for a roll-off container and light-duty equipment. And then Article 20, tax title revolving fund to amend the treasurer. So then articles continue to go on, and it does not appear, I think we've hit the Article 23 is to rescind some borrowings. So I think we can handle, invite the town administrator and maybe our treasurer collector to come in and we can go through all of these articles in a pretty good swoop. Does anyone feel like they need more information from any other articles or have any level of significant questions on those? Al, go ahead.
I just have a question about the rooms tax, and I understand that it is not specifically relating to a local business or businesses plural, but I'd like more information as how it compares to other room taxes in the area.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. So we'll make sure, I believe Jim will be able to, we'll invite Jim and he'll be able to talk us through.
Okay, great. No, that's fine.
Great question. Hugh, go ahead.
I just have the usual question about 30 and 31, which are road acceptances. We know they're supposedly been filed with the town and qualified by the town highway department, so forth and so on. But we usually look at them and don't know whether or not. Now, Jim will probably know, but just the fact to be added to the list to confirm where it stands.
Yes, we'll add those to the list as well. So, right, they're petition articles, and we don't know if they're in dispute or if there's any issues with the roads and if they've been. But yes, we'll add those along too. And then, of course, the articles at the end are funding the stabilization account, the capital stabilization, and then the special education special reserve account. So those are also. And the town administrator has made recommendations and how he was proposing to use free cash. So we have those numbers from the town administrator. So I think we can do this in a one swoop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most of them are nothing that really affect anything we have any connection with. I mean, they
Right.
may indirectly, but they're not real FinCom questions.
Right. And then it doesn't appear that there's anything extremely controversial in them. So, so it seems like this will be, we'll be able to get through those quick. Does anyone else have any other thoughts or comments on that? So we can do that.
I'm not sure whether this is relevant or not, but I did check with, remember last year we had a zoning article involving the intensified building around, it was around quite that neck of the woods. There's no such article this year. And that was driven by the MBTA mandates, etc. The answer I got and I acquired was basically it wasn't overlooked. That isn't pending at this point. We'll just wait and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
I think also the only other article that may draw a crowd, although I think the planning board has been very good about trying to advertise the fact that they've been working on this, and that's the short-term rental. So it seems to be a pretty watered down version of it. It's kind of like what we have now. It's self-monitoring. They need to get a permit per se, but there are very few rules about other than complaints. I mean, if neighbors complain about it, you could have your permit rescinded. But those are some of the things that the town administrator is trying to work out. That's probably what his biggest concern is the enforcement and policing of such. That it ends up in the select board's office, and it's not something that they really have the manpower to be able to enforce to a large degree. So I'll be interested to hear what else he has to say about that.
Cindy, I skipped over that on theory. We usually don't opine on zoning articles.
Right.
But you're quite right. It will be a matter of some interest. I just didn't think it was in our
It's not our purview.
so much. Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Christopher, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so when the short-term rental question came up last year, I did feel that the finance committee should have an opinion on this article, and I still feel the same. I understand I'm not going to win that argument, but I will say I appreciate that there are certain things the way this article has been developed that I appreciate, but there are a couple of what I fear are going to be fatal flaws. There's one particular that basically the sentence reads in this regard: the select board may impose conditions applicable to each individual permit, meaning basically every single permit is going to have to go through the select board, and every single permit is subject to any kind of random condition. That's I anticipate that there's going to be significant pushback from that. But I also am curious as to the costs of enforcement versus the costs or the fees and revenues coming in from the permitting process. So these are two questions I do have relative to the numbers on this article.
Yeah, I guess they have likened it to some degree similar to what happens at East Beach. So each year, the tenants at East Beach or the trailer holders at East Beach must get a permit that's issued by the select board. And depending on the lot and the condition of the lot, they impose certain restrictions or certain things that have to be met before that permit is granted. After that, I mean, yeah, they don't really do much, policing. They collect a fee for the permit. And it is what it is. I think short-term rental would have a little bit of a different impact depending on, where, what's going on at that short-term rental, right? So I agree with you, Chris. I mean, I think that there will be, issues involving enforcement and whether or not there's a cost associated with that enforcement. So it'll be interesting to hear what the town administrator has to say about that. I don't
Yeah,
think he's a,
I
I don't think
agree
he's a
when-
fan.
Right. I agree. When Jim, when the town administrator, when we invite the town administrator to talk about the warrant articles, we'll certainly, Christopher, discuss your exact question. And then we can still get an answer to that. And then the finance committee can determine if we feel there's enough financial implication that we would need to recommend or not recommend the article. But we certainly should ask your questions that you have. Absolutely. Al, go ahead.
I'm going to pull back my question because the three of you have pretty much outlined what my concerns are. And it's enforcement. It's the building inspector who is way over reached in terms of the needs as the zoning agent, capable of doing the kind of things, enforcement, if you will. So I'll just leave it on the table that the three of you have hit my hot buttons. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
All right. Well, it sounds like I'll talk to the town administrator, see if we can get the next available date, and we really would need the final warrant, so we would have a good base that we could get the presentation and potentially even make the recommendations the same day and be done if we can. So I think we're still in good shape. I don't have the schedule in front of me where I know the warrant has to be finalized with our recommendations by some certain date. So we're closing in on it, but we still have some time. So we're not at the urgent point yet. But in 2 or 3 weeks, we will be. So we don't have an endless amount of time. All right. So moving on from the warrant. So the next item on the agenda is the fiscal 26 budget. And I want to try to share that presentation. All right, does everybody see the sharing of the budget?
Yeah.
Of the,
Yes.
Okay. So just to give, so the select board made its recommendation of their version of the budget and passed it along to the finance committee, and we did receive that at the last meeting. Jim did mention that there were a couple of things that were still pending that he was hoping to have resolved soon, and hopefully soon. And so they have come through as being resolved in a favorable and a good way to the budget, which is always a plus when it happens that way. And Jim did a great job and highlighted everything in the memo, which I have up here. So subsequent to the select board budget being finalized, the diamond charge did come in, and it was 234,000 lower than what was the placeholder in the budget. So expenses are being reduced in our version of the budget, because again, the select board already finalized their budget, so we can roll these sort of changes into the finance committee recommended budget. Jim also heard from health insurance, and it looks like that was able to be reduced by $100,000. And then Jim also took a look at local receipts revenue and increased the revenue by 200,000. And in the budget that you all have, there's a tab for the revenue, and I can put that on the screen, and you can see where all of the different line items got changed by 200,000. So that means the budget has $534,000 more to share with both the town and school on its expenses. So that's a very positive thing from where we left off. These are the notes. So The Finance Committee at the last meeting had discussed a couple of potential changes, which would be helping fund the animal control officer and the building department. And so factoring the things that we talked about as potential at the last meeting and bringing into all the additional revenue, Jim did a great job and he reran the whole budget for us, and we have that. So this is the summary that does everything. And I'm going to close that out. Does anyone have any questions before I share the next thing?
I just wanted to say, I believe this does not include an estimate, the 200,000 for the room tax increase.
That's correct. It does not assume that that will have passed. And so that is not in there. So if it did pass at town meeting, then in theory, those increased revenues would be part of next year's surplus right. But they are not budgeted because they're not certain at this point. Okay, so if I share the screen. Okay, can everybody see? So the operating revenue. So this first column here is where the select board voted on the budget, and column S is the changes. And so scrolling down here are where the extra $200,000 of local receipts revenue came from. So $35,000 in excise, and just moving down through. So everyone can see where that came from. So I'll just express, I have a little concern on this. I think so in Jim's memo, he's pushed it up to 85% of revenue. So we're kind of at a little approaching the aggressive end of budgeting. So we're still within a tolerable range, but we're really up against the limit of it. So if something doesn't go as planned, you just don't have a lot of wiggle room. And what this means is, in theory, that will generate less free cash next year. But anyway, so that's I'm not overly concerned on my opinion on it, but I think it's a little on the aggressive side of that. Okay, so moving over to can you see the summary tab now?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So local receipts were increased by 200,000. By the results of all the changes, free cash went from 541,000 down to 400,000. And that was really eliminating the need to use free cash to pay off the campground debt. I heard a hand is up.
Yeah, Karen, just quickly.
Yeah.
The local receipts of an increase of $200,000. Is that in fact the potential for rooms tax, or is that something else?
That's not. So that was
Okay.
that was what Hugh asked a moment ago.
Yes,
So
right,
that
right.
does not assume that that room tax would be increased from 4 to 6%.
That's fine. I heard what Hugh said, but I just wanted to double check.
Nope,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep,
Thank you.
absolutely.
I think it's reflected a little bit more in auto excise tax was bumped up a little bit,
Right.
as well as maybe some rooms tax, but that was really based on the existing rooms tax that we collect currently. And he felt that maybe he was a little bit light there, but it does not include new
Okay.
revenue.
No, that's fine. No
Yep.
no need to go any further. Yeah, thank you very much.
Sure thing.
I just wanted to check. Yeah.
Sure thing. So free cash, so the 400,000 is the same supplement to the school department's budget. So that's the free cash use. We had talked about increasing our reserve fund. This was kind of a plug to kind of get things to balance a little bit, so that can be changed as we need to. But so that was increasing our reserve fund. Jim had suggested increasing property insurance because it looked like that was coming in a little bit higher than he anticipated. Then the two changes that we highlighted was a $30,000 for the building department and $30,000 for the animal control department. And then, the regional schools was decreased by 234,000. So that's the assessment coming in lower. And then taking the 54% split on all of these things that came in has increased the additional funds to the school by 112,000, which brings it to 23,654,943. And then I think that is it. Oh, and then health insurance decreased by the 100,000 is all identified in the memo. I heard a question. Go ahead, Al. You're on mute, Al?
Huh?
You're on mute. There you
I'm
go.
sorry. Yeah, there we go. I'm sorry to be a nudge. Could you go back to the school assessment for a second?
Sure thing.
So my question is that if we are down 234, is that money coming from, and I hate to use these words, but it's the way it is, the town side versus the school side? And would it be prudent if a portion or all of it comes from the school side to reallocate those funds to the school?
Well,
I don't know the answer. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, we traditionally have done the 54% split, and that's a tab in here as well. And so the town shares the revenue and shares the common expenses equally. So that's always been part of the calculation.
All right.
Not right, wrong, or indifferent, but that's maintaining consistency.
That's the way that it's been. Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
Because
I
you
just,
get into you get into the nuances. If you say, well, this should be 100% to the school, then there could be other things to say, well, then this should be 0% to the school.
Well,
right?
of course.
So-
I mean, we
right.
all know about all of the ancillary expenses
Right.
from the school that are put in on the budget on the town
Right.
side.
Right.
I get that. I was just curious where that negative or credit, if you will, was it direct expenses?
Well, and again, it's not a credit. It's not a credit. It's just a credit from the last version of the budget because Jim had to estimate and he estimated a certain
All right.
amount. So it's just a change from where we left off. It's not.
Okay.
It's not a savings. It's an estimate that was.
It's an estimated savings,
Right.
or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
decreased the original estimate.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. Hugh, go ahead.
I just wanted to say how nice it is to have found an extra $500,000 in this cushions.
It sure was. It sure was.
I'm not sure there's going to be as much pocket change falling in those cushions in the future years. I mean,
Right.
we've got the police department is going to play a big role in this because, they have been funded in the past years for, 28 to 31 officers. And up until this past year, they were carrying 25 or 26. So every year they had a significant turn back, as you know. So they've had a significant turn back every year. And we're not going to see that because they're fully, they're going to be fully stocked as soon as this academy class is done. And so some of those turnbacks are not going to be flowing down to the bottom line in excess net income, Al, for your purposes.
Yep. No, that's
Instead of free cash.
Right.
Right.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate
You're
that.
absolutely
Cindy.
right. But I'd also point out that last year's excess took care of some capital needs for a couple of years.
Right.
So you're right, there won't be, but it was used, I think, very productively in last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So just finishing up where the changes are. So right now, the budget showing a surplus of 118,000. And so Jim is suggesting, he's recommending to put 40,000 back add 40,000 to the assessor overlay and then put the balance into the health insurance account. That I think kind of negatively would impact the 54% split to the school number, but at some point we've got to just let it roll. But that would impact that a little bit. But
I'll say that health insurance is one of the things that needs to cover both sides of the equation.
right. So that's the changes so far. So I'm going to unshare my screen so I can see all of you again. And you all have, this was emailed to all of you too, so you have all of that.
Yep.
Okay.
Karen, do you have a recap of how the school budget fares in this? I don't know if you were going to get to that, but I know you showed the number in the budget there, but given how much additional funds were added to the budget, given what the school budget was originally submitted for, using the free cash, how close does this come to? It's my understanding we were about $1 million short prior to this, and now it's about 400,000 or so short. But I may be I don't have my paper here in front of me.
I
as to
think
how
I don't have it unless Jim has it in his memo, but the select board budget, the initial using the 54% split in its normal fashion as compared to the school committee's request was over $1 million difference. And then with the combination of free cash and the select board had allocated some revenue 100% rather than using the 54% split, that left about a $500,000 gap between the select board's number and what the school committee's number is. And so now an extra 112,000 has come to there. So 380, 390, somewhere in that range.
okay. But that's still maintaining the 54
Correct.
split.
So
correct?
Jim, so in this version, we went back to the pure 54% split. So,
Right.
So we corrected that. So it's still at the 54%.
Right. The increased revenue took the burden off of increased free cash.
Yes.
So it makes the burden about 200,000 lower of using free cash. So
Yeah.
it keeps it in line with our goal to try to bring that down so that at some point it can be self-sustaining.
Right.
Right. Good. Okay.
So questions, comments, observations.
I'm amazed how well it seems to have balanced out over. We're short 400 on the school's wish, etc. But that was a foregone conclusion that it was not sustainable to begin with, not in their minds maybe, but everybody else's. So almost a magic wand has been waved somewhere.
It is, Hugh, and the concerning part is it's helpful that this year that it seems to a mini magic wand is I mean, it's not perfect because this school number isn't what they had requested, and nor our other department on the town's side is also lacking a lot as well, but
working within what
Yeah.
is available to it now. It could be a little bit less optimistic. The future, things may be a lot tougher because
Right.
Massachusetts is not on the good list as far as the feds are concerned. We don't
Right.
have Boston or the sanctuary city kinds of problems, but Massachusetts is not going to be a favored nation.
well,
Manufacturing crises where they aren't there yet.
well, we're not being political here on a
Next year.
national level.
I agree. It's not this time. Looking ahead for next time we go around this time. Let's see what we have.
Right, so without being political on a national level, but thinking about our economics, right? So if we're heading towards increased prices all around, that very potentially will impact the turnbacks from next year. So more likely, instead of departments underspending and turning money back, they may in fact need to spend all their money because their costs are going up. So you may have less turnbacks, which will result in less free cash.
And also, I'm sorry, but less buying of new cars, which makes a difference.
Absolutely. So less buying, less excise tax, and all of that could impact revenue as well. And in this budget, we've tweaked up the local receipts to be at that 85%. So we're kind of at the upper end of that too. So that could impact free cash next year too. So, you know,
this year, so
right. They're not affecting it this year, but next year could, you know, all hands could be moving in a direction of next year being less free cash and being a more difficult year. But that's the way budgeting goes. So we're trying to deal with this year and trying to accommodate as much as we can, but we need to keep an eye on the future too. Go ahead, Al.
One of the things that I think that we or a subcommittee or another committee should be looking at is the 3 to 5 year aging of accounts. And the accounts happen to be the people that are working in all departments at the town hall, at the school department. And what are they getting paid? What's their total package, and what do we need to be competitive? Because within the next 3 to 5 years, there are going to be a lot of people cycling out of their job. They're going to retire. They're going to have a life. Oh my God, they're going to have a life, right? And what do we need to be looking at to replace that type of person at that type of pay? It's not a discussion for tonight, but I do think it's something that we need to really consider. It's almost like CIPC in a way, and rather than machinery, let's look at probably our most important asset, which are the people. So
yeah, absolutely, Al. And you know, that's another component too, right? So it's probably pretty fair to say that when someone retires, that it's probably going to be more expensive to replace that positions, right? So there will be future budget demands just by the natural turnover. And so that's another element that factors into future years. Don't know next year or the year after, but that definitely is going to impact the budgets. So what I'd like to do with this budget, we all have it. I want to know if anybody has any suggestions of changes. I don't want us to approve the budget tonight, but I'd like us to be in a position at our next meeting that we should probably get this budget reviewed and approved so we can get that behind us. So I want to talk through if anybody has any concerns or comments on anything here that we're addressing those.
I just speak that it looks to me that it does the best it can with what we have available, and things that we talked about, like the animal control officer, like the Board of Health, those were dealt with in this process. I don't think there's an awful lot more that we can do with what we've got, but others may differ, obviously.
I think you're right, Hugh. I mean, as my father used to say, you play the cards you're dealt, and
Right.
yeah.
Right. Christopher, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I have just a quick question regarding some of the CIPC funds. Specifically, this cemetery expansion. I was under the impression that it was not an expansion so much as it was just more of a maintenance thing. I guess I direct this question through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Lees. What exactly was the cemetery CIPC going towards?
Karen, do you want me to?
Go ahead.
So my understanding at the meeting is that we have X amount of space available in the current location, and there needs to be a capital expenditure to prep and get everything ready. We don't know how much land area it is, because I had to be graphic about it, but it among other things, it's a water table issue, Chris. Yeah. And so that it wasn't about, as my understanding, it wasn't about going out and looking for another location. It was about taking the balance of the property that behind the police department and the fire station, and be able to prep and get ready for expansion there. It was not a capital expense to look for another piece of property, if you will, to add another cemetery.
And
That's going to come.
Right. It's not a maintenance issue. This is plotting this is engineering and surveying
Exactly.
that expansion, right?
So let me ask you this. So it's not, just to repeat here, it is not a capital expense for a new piece of property. It would be dealing with property that's currently owned by the town. With the revelation that there's about $1 million or so in reserves for community preservation, wouldn't this maybe be a better candidate for that type of grant as opposed to a CIPC grant?
That's beyond my pay grade. It's a fair question, and it's a question that needs to be asked, but I'm certainly not prepared to expound to that tonight, Chris. And it's nothing against what your question. I just
Oh no,
yeah.
and I certainly didn't mean to direct that towards that particular question. It was more rhetorical. Certainly not going directly to you, Mr. Lees, on that. But I am curious that and frankly, I think there's even a good argument that the Macomber Playground expenditure would also really might be better served coming from the community preservation reserves. I admit that number, the amount of funds that are in reserve for that program, considering the surcharge rate that we currently have in town. I feel like that should be, we should really look towards those funds before allocating free cash to things that would fall under that purview. So
Just to expand on that, I think that was a very recent conversation when Betty Slade had seen the warrant and had seen the school playground. It was a thought that why hadn't it been brought to the CPC as a recreation? And I think it's too late this year, so that's not happening this year because it's too late. But that was an observation that was made. And from what I understand, through that exchange, any CPC funds would mean that it would need to be able to be used by the public as well. And so that would have to be worked out as well. But Hugh, you're an expert on CPC. You can respond, right?
Yeah, I'm going to say, if we're talking about the cemetery, I'm not all sure that falls under the purview of CPC. Basically, it's housing, public space preservation, and recreation. None of those seem to fit. Now, maybe there's some interpretation somewhere that makes it different, but I would think that was not possible. But we'll find out. And again, it's not this year's decision, it's next year, and we'll if somebody brings it up, we'll deal with it.
Great, thank you. Duncan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, it's good to see the budget move in the right direction from where we were. And I think Christopher's questions are very interesting, and particularly if we're going to have potentially more trouble next year, if we had some leverage in CPC funds or somewhere else to help the ongoing school budget. I think that would be certainly worth pursuing aggressively.
Duncan, I wouldn't go down that road very far. CPC is only for specified categories, which are basically not operating fund things.
Right, I was going to clarify that too. So the playground is not part of the operating budget, so that would be separate and distinct.
I say I think it's three, maybe I've overlooked something, but specified areas that are the only things it can be used for. Schools is not one of them.
Great. So just back to the budget. So if we were to, and this is a hypothetical. So if we were putting the vote to the budget today, would we be prepared to approve this, or does anyone have suggestions of changes at this point?
I would like to wait until next week's meeting and look at it in detail. This is my issue, not yours. This is my third finance committee meeting today for different organizations. And so what I would like to do is have a time to be able to just absorb it and wait until whenever next week's meeting to be able to say that.
Yeah. And I tried to phrase it as hypothetically, because I'm not asking us to vote on
Okay.
it. I think I always like to see information and then have time to kind of absorb it and think through, and did you think of everything? And so I don't think it's would be fair to ask the committee to do it. But what I'm trying to get to is, in the past, whether it's warrant articles on this committee or the previous committees, not you all necessarily, right? I've been part of the committee where we've talked about a warrant article, and we had deliberations, we had conversations, and it seemed like the conversations were favorable. And then a vote got taken, and a couple of certain people were an emphatic no on the article. And it was a surprise to me to hear somebody say no when there was nothing in the deliberation that even discussed the opinion that would be a no. Because afterwards I had asked the person to say, hey, what was your no? And then this was after the meeting, and they explained all of their reasons. And I thought, well, that should have been part of the deliberations. I would have loved to have heard the other side of something. And so I always get taken back when someone's silent and then it's a no, and then there's no discussion of, well, I didn't know you were opposed. What could we have done to have made it a yes, right? So that's what I'm just trying to that's my thought process on that. Whether it's the budget or all the articles, I think it's important that we deliberate and discuss what opinions are, and so we're not surprised.
Yeah.
And that theme, I would say, my ability to attend next week's meeting is very questionable. But if this were a vote, I would be in favor.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't, but I appreciate that. I wasn't necessarily I'm just trying to, if there's an opposition, I would like to know what that might be, and what could we do to accommodate an opposition to make it so that it would be.
You might ask for a straw vote, which is not binding and subject to reconsideration with new information.
Oh, I've never done that before. Christopher, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So as one of the individuals who did vote no on the budget last year, I will say that I think that's certainly any individual's right as a member of the FinCom. I will also say that there are certain things in this budget that I am opposed to. Quite frankly, I will say right now, spending $200,000 in free cash on a potential for a cemetery expansion does not strike me as a real priority that really needs to be funded this year. But I also understand, and I think I know that from other, at least for one other member, there's been similar frustrations. There's one thing, it's one thing to deliberate and offer arguments against. It's another thing to beat your head against a wall. And sometimes, people have made their stances clear, and one might not want to waste any more hot air. So that's just another side, another perspective, I guess, going forward to think about when it comes to these things.
I'm just going to take a little opposition to both of those comments. I think if there, of course, any member is allowed to vote yes or no on any budget. So ideally, it would be optimal if the Finance Committee were to present a budget that all members supported, but that may or may not be the case, and that's perfectly acceptable, that if not every member supports it. But what I'm trying to get to is, if a member isn't of support, it'd be important to know what that might be so that we could try to remedy that. So that's the purpose of my conversation. And in regards to the 200,000 in free cash for the cemetery, that's not part of this operating budget. So that's a separate article. And that's a separate article that you could vote no on if you didn't feel that that was something that you supported. But that's not part of the operating budget.
Christopher, how old are you?
Probably older than you think.
Maybe, but I'll tell you what, the older you get, the more the cemetery makes sense. So that's all I wanted to just toss into that.
Now I tell you, I'm not planning to use it.
Well, neither am I. Although I have my plot ready. It's right across from 10 cousins, and the joke is that when I buy stuff, I keep the points, and I never use them, because when I finally die, we can have the party across the street and have it already paid for.
And I'm sure Richard will buy you.
What are you saying?
And I just want to go back to the budget. I appreciate that that comment in the cemetery.
Sorry.
So, we've had our budget meetings from December 4th, right? Not all of us have been able to attend every meeting. And so I hope that those meetings that someone wasn't able to attend, that they watch the meeting so they're familiar with the budgets.
Yes.
When a person's not at the meeting, it doesn't offer that ability of that person, if they had a concern about a particular budget, to have voiced it at that meeting. So if there is opposition to a department budget, I didn't hear a lot of opposition in the meetings that we held at the Finance Committee meetings. So those should be brought forth if there are any, so we can try to address and accommodate them. So that's my comments.
Does it have a tie on?
So, okay, so I think that's, any other suggested changes to the budget? So I'll do one more revision incorporating Jim's comments that he had at the bottom that he had highlighted, suggesting the overlay reserve and putting it to there. And so that will be the
Karen, I
budget.
guess my question is, do you intend to have Jim present at our next meeting?
I am
So
going
that
to
any
ask
of these, so that any of these questions could be addressed.
Yeah, so we can nail it down and
Right.
Well,
yeah,
I'd like to know if there are questions, we should know about them in advance so that we could give Jim advance time to ask the questions. I don't think it's fair for him to come to a
Mhm.
meeting and just be
That's-
asked questions out of the blue. So if there
Okay.
are concerns, they should be brought forth as questions now so that we can ask them to address them.
So Karen, to save you, Jim, and all of us, within the next, pick a number, 72 hours, if we have any questions, email them to you
Sure.
so you can forward them to Jim. And after that, pick a number. I mean, if Thursday night at midnight, I don't really care. And then after that,
Sure.
just deal with what's on the table and then make the decision at the next point.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And anybody can ask a question.
Yeah.
That next Tuesday, you could think of it as he's there, and I'm not restricting you. Sorry, you can't ask the question, but if you have known questions, we should.
Exactly. I mean,
as a
at some
courtesy and
point, you just
respect.
got to shut all of us down and just move forward. Yes.
Christopher, go ahead.
Well, I will now email. I will say I have a specific question that actually relates to something that was on the audit. Was at the audit committee regarding the abatement accounts, and the section of the management letter that notes that the town's allowance for abatement accounts exceeded 1.2 million in the current year, despite only about 25,000 of estimated loss.
I can't.
That's one particular thing I would like to get like to ask of the
Well, Christopher, Nicole is actually with us, and we addressed that at the audit committee. And so, Nicole, are you there? Well, she was with us.
She does still show she's there.
Yeah.
She is here, but she's muted.
oh,
I'm
that-
here.
Oh, yeah.
She's here. Hi,
I
Nicole.
couldn't get the darn thing to turn on.
You woke up, right?
Where we have been looking at it, I'm going to do another analysis with the assessor because they are releasing $450,000 for this town meeting. Well, actually, they've already released it, but we're going to use it at this town meeting for the ambulance or for the fire engine.
For the fire engine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So, but after that, we'll take a look at it and we'll assess to see what they need and what they have, and we may release more. We're not sure yet, but that's something that I have to have a discussion with Theo regarding what we want to do with the excess. I'm not sure what she has like in the works, because some of these abatements could take years, and we don't know what's out there. I don't know, so that's something I have to talk to her about.
Right,
Okay.
and you said 450,000 is
Yes.
being flown through already, so it's already
Yes,
being
it's-
addressed and being.
It's right.
Yeah.
The letter already went from the selectmen to the assessors requesting the release of the funds. So that's already been voted on by the assessors. So once it approved at town meeting, then it'll be in an article for the fire engine.
Okay.
And again, similar to free cash, right? So this is sort of it's potentially a reserve, and now it's being utilized, right? So it's similar to free cash where it's a one-time fund. And so
Yes.
trying to use it
Yeah.
in the same concept of using it for one-time expenses like capital would be the preferred way. So really isn't something that would come through an operating budget to be
No.
used in that way, because it's a one-time fund. So,
Correct.
I tell you, it is not really it's a reserve. It's a
Right.
continuing fund because it will be funded from reserve against potential abatements from time to time. So yes, it's a capital fund in the sense that it's there against potential liabilities, but it's not static. It gets added to as time goes by and released when it's decided to be excessive.
So to that point, do we know over the last 5, 6, 7 years what percentage of the abatement funds have actually been claimed by individuals versus in reserve? So, what I'm saying is that if we have a fund of X amount of dollars, do we only spend or place in other areas 80%, 75%, whatever it might be, or do we just kind of wing it?
Yeah, I think the answer has to come from the assessors, but remember, this is abatements on particular properties. Some are
Right.
small, some are big. So that the amount that's an issue may be not very much or a lot. And what you're going to do in terms of getting an adverse decision may be the big ones and not the little ones. So I think the assessors are the ones that want to tell us what is an adequate reserve against possible forced rebates.
All right. So maybe that's what we should consider. And it's a little bit off topic, but if we're shifting 450 to a fire truck, which I am all for, to be honest with you, what is the percentage? Should we be shifting 300? That, just to pick a number out of the air, because and keep a reserve on file for potential abatements.
Now, we've done this over the years. I remember several years ago squeezing money out of the overlay for this and that. But it comes back to the assessors, and you're absolutely right to ask the question, what do they think is necessary to retain and for what purpose? I mean, they are pending cases, and not just in terms of
Nicole,
sky.
did the assessor's office approve the 450? Were they comfortable? Were they in the loop on
Yes.
that? And they were.
Yes.
So that's
so
already
the-
been taken care of, right?
Yes, the mechanism for releasing overlay in lump sums is that the selectmen send a letter to the assessors requesting a certain amount of money to be released from overlay. The assessors then vote on it, sign the letter, and then they give it to me to make the transfer. During the tax recap session, when the tax rate is set, so back in November when we set the tax rate, a certain percentage is put into overlay for the FY25 real estate and personal property bills for potential abatements and refunds.
Okay.
So that the assessors can, tell you based on that approximate percentage of what we put in there every year. As for the previous years, that's where I know Theo has a spreadsheet that says, what's coming and going. So they would determine, what years have been kept, how much has been kept, and what's still a potential payment that is still pending. So that's where we have to look and say, well, FY21, there's 3 cases, so it might be this amount of money, but then anything else left from that year could be released. But that's a conversation that we'd have to have with the assessors to determine if there's anything to be released. And if it's not released for a certain project, then it would be released and fall into free cash. It's not just like, we don't just put it in a reserve fund or anywhere else. It's either for a project or it would be free cash.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good info.
All right. Anything else on the budget?
So
Okay.
the one other question that I
Yep.
would have to the town accountant and to the town administrator would be, I know that there has been discussions of several several accounts or warrant articles that are old at this point that have random amounts of funds in those in those accounts, and I was just trying to figure out. I've asked a couple times to try and get a as near the full accounting as possible, I guess, to see what what old warrant articles are still out there, other than I know there's a couple transfers here on the draft warrant as it stands right now, but I'm just curious what other funds have been sequestered away for quite some time now.
So to answer that, I have been looking at all outstanding accounts, whether they're grant accounts, revolving accounts, special revenue accounts, agency accounts, articles. Every single year, the articles that are voted at town meeting, that's one thing. And every year in May, I send out a memo that says, these are your articles. Do you want to retain the article or return the article? There really isn't a lot in articles because those are usually for specific purposes and they get used right away. Some of the other special revenue accounts that the auditors are talking about, I have been in touch with several departments to say, hey, we have this money. Nobody's used it in 5 years. Let me know what it's for. If you can use it, use it. If not, we transfer it to miscellaneous revenue. Then it'll fall into free cash. So some of like older grants. So they get a grant for $5,000. They spend $4,900. So they got $100 sitting there that they forgot about. Or somebody had it and then they left the position and the new person doesn't know that there's still this money sitting here. So those are the kind of things I'm trying to clean up by going through the accounts, find out when was the last time it was used, and going out to the department and say, hey, can we use this? So I'm cleaning up a lot of those accounts to make sure they're all current.
Nicole, I'd like to add just one thing. Christopher, you may recall last year's town warrant, there were several articles regarding even some accounts that were allocated towards school projects that were either done in prior years, and there were balances, and there were several things that were switched. This was the second year that comment was kind of carried over on the audit. And last year, there were probably, I'm going to say, 5 articles, Nicole, that we took care of large balances from previous articles and applied them to current day projects.
Yes, yes.
Is that right?
There was, yeah, I think there were like 4, and that's what we did. We repurposed them for something else, sort of like the article that's on there now to repurpose an old assessor's article for software.
Right.
You know, so
so we've been making some real
yes.
Headway on taking care of a lot of those. Yeah, you still have to look up that $25,000 one, Nicole, for the cemetery department, and let me know whether or not we use that one.
I did look it up. We still do have that $25,000 for a feasibility study.
Yeah.
But I'm going to suggest to Jim that we return that particular article because I don't think we need it.
Right.
But that's not under my purview. That's the Board of Selectmen to whether they want to retain or return the articles.
So Nicole, of the ones that you're still, actively working with other departments, would you say, are there any of substantial dollar amounts, or are they more small nuisance type, got to clean them up kind of thing
Can you provide us with a list?
Yes, I can provide you with a list, but most of them, yes, they are small. Case in point, there was one for the fire department that was a gift from like a Walmart Foundation or something. There's like $135 left in there, and it's been sitting there since like 2010. So I called the fire department. I said, hey, you guys got this grant. If you can find the paperwork that says what you can spend this on, spend it. And so we can get it out of here. Police department has a couple of things that, again, they had a grant that they used for, I forgot what it was for, but there's a little bit of money left. So, we're gonna spend it. As for articles like the new vehicles, so the police go out and buy the new vehicles, I want to make sure that they use the money for the vehicles. So if they have to equip anything electrical, decals, anything they need for that new car, use the money that's in the article, because then they're not using it in their budget, which will fall into free cash. So there's kind of a two-step process to all of this. And it's also like by me sending out the memo that says, hey, you have this money, it keeps it on their radar that says, hey, I need to look more closely at all of these and, keep track of them more often. So
If you could send a list to send it either to Karen or myself, and we will forward it to the committee members, that would be helpful.
sure, I can do that.
Great, terrific. Thank you, Nicole. Al, go
I
ahead.
just wanted to say a follow-up to that. It would be important, Nicole, because candidly, and you use the fire department, police department, and there's obviously every department, they've got so many things juggling in their brain. We have liaisons from finance committee to these different departments, and maybe all they need to do is hear from us, whomever it might be, and say, you got $200 for this, spend the damn thing, to help them out, because they kind of have bigger issues, but it's important for you and the rest of the town to be able to juggle and clean up a lot of this stuff. So that's all I wanted to just weigh in. We can be helpful with the departments to help them.
I will say in support of the great job that really Nicole has done, and as well as Sue Brayton has done in turning around the financial situation of the town as far as its record keeping and where we stand, and having some idea of what our books look like. I would almost coin the management letter, which now called something different now, but I still call it the management letter, as being almost nitpicking, because they had nothing negative to say. There wasn't a single negative comment of any relevance whatsoever in their whole report. Now, this is coming off of 3-4 years ago, where there were 3 pages
At least, yeah.
of negative comments
And material weaknesses.
of material weaknesses. I say negative comments,
Right.
material weaknesses. We had no material weaknesses at all. And they were almost really kind of nitpicking at trying to find things to cite as being, well, you should take a look at this or take a look at that. Even our, payments for OPEB, that's a comment that's made every year. Westport stands well above the state average of what our OPEB liability, what we've paid towards our OPEB liability. Now, 20% may not seem like a very large number, and in the corporate world, it probably is not. The state average, from what I recall, is about 11%.
Right.
And Westport is at 20%. So it's good that we can continue to make payments towards that. But we've done a great job in turning things around, and it's great that Nicole and Sue work so well together. They communicate well. They both have a good understanding of what the law is and what they can and cannot do with the finances. And it's just great that it's worked out as well as it has.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Cindy. That's true. Absolutely. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you, Nicole, too.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. And in full disclosure, and it's not because Susan is my cousin, but the two of them have worked out extremely well. And if you look at, it's not just 11 to 20%. That's about, I'm doing my head math here, a 45% increase over what the average is. I mean, that's with the limited resources that we have and are able to expend and still deliver.
And in fact,
I think it's
one
important.
of the items that Jim used in one of the additions of the budget is that we trim back our OPEB contribution a little bit, because we could this year a little bit because we had a good cushion. And, you know, it was applied to things that we needed a little bit more. So it's not the type of thing that we continue to fund it blindly. We continue to fund it because we're supposed to. And we
Right.
continue to fund it if there's a year where we can clip 20,000 off or whatever, he'll choose to do that. And that was exactly the case this year. In order to make some of these other numbers work, he clipped a little bit off of the OPEB payment that we would normally be making.
All right, so if nothing else on this, we can, any other questions for, again, as Al said, if there's any additional questions for Jim, it would be helpful to have it in advance. And if in the next couple of days, you could send that off, if there's anything else, that would be helpful.
Okay.
All right, so the next item on our agenda is any updates on committee or liaison updates? Is there anything else? It sounds we've already talked about the audit committee quite a bit. Cindy, can you send us the audit committee management letter and everything? I'm not sure we have
sure.
that.
It's still the draft. They've not.
Oh, it's still a
defined.
draft. Okay.
Right. Is that true, Nicole? Is it still the draft?
No, the audit is final.
Oh, okay. It is
The
final now. Okay.
The federal single audit is final and been submitted, so everything is done. I can forward that to you guys.
Okay.
That'd be great. Thank you.
No problem.
Christopher, we're having a long-term building committee meeting next week. Is that correct? The 19th? Isn't that what the date that the,
Yes, now I
that the group-
actually do not have the confirmation from RGB as of yet, but I do, that is the original, as the original schedule was laid out, it was the 19th, yes.
okay, so that meeting will have to be posted by Monday.
Yes, so I'm hoping, hoping to hear back from them pretty shortly, so.
And we were thinking about changing the venue perhaps? You
There-
wanted to
yeah, so-
invite the public?
That's actually part of the conversation.
Right.
Part of the email back and forth here. So as soon as I have a good, I believe we're going to have it in in a larger venue. I don't know if that's going to be the library or
Right.
another venue as of yet, though.
Yeah, the library is not open on Wednesday evening, so that would be a problem. And I think, I don't know if it's a Board of Appeals meeting night. They would have already posted public hearings for the select board room for when, they usually have their meetings on Wednesday. So I only bring this up, and I know this is not a finance committee issue, but while I have your attention, I'm sorry, that they quite often meet on Wednesdays, and they have public hearings that are posted for that room, so they can't change their room.
Gotcha. And actually, so that's part of why I'm waiting for the confirmation.
Okay, good. All right.
Basically, they have on their chart most of the meetings happening on Thursday, but for some reason this has a start date of Wednesday and a close date of Thursday. So
Okay.
might be some confusion as to exactly what. So I'm trying to get a good
All right,
answer.
good. Okay.
So
good.
just as a quick thought, the police department has a wonderful meeting room.
True.
Yeah, they do. It's very large.
So
room.
that may be another option.
JJ, there's also the Howland Hall.
There you go. The one that CPC wants to fund. That's right. Mm.
Well, Christopher, is there something on the topic for the meeting that you anticipate a grander public participation that you need a different venue?
So
Can
this
you maybe explain what your upcoming committee might be doing?
So there are two meetings scheduled over the course of the next 2 months that are going to be talking about basically asking for public input on potential options, reuse options. Well, not just reuse options, just options in general. They have been working on the feasibility study. And the last meeting that we had discussed the findings of their site visits of the town buildings that they looked at and looked at some of the challenges and certain things being in good shape, certain things not, and seeing where there would be there might be some challenges as far as either continuing to utilize the town hall, town annex, or and the council on aging, as opposed to some of the challenges with trying to do a reuse of the old high school. So these two meetings are going to be based or are going to be very involved with the public to try and get ideas and discuss some of their preliminary findings as well. So
Great, thank you. All right, so if no other committee meetings
No.
to discuss, okay, great. I will move on to the minutes. So my agenda I was incorrect on one of my dates. So January 7th, I'd had on my list to approve the minutes, but those minutes had been previously approved. But I also did not include January 21st on the list that are meeting minutes. So, and you should have received a recirculation of the minutes there. I condensed them to remove all of the conversational budget discussions and really make it a little more sleeker minutes. So did everyone have a chance to look at the,
Yep.
and everyone okay with the redo of those?
Mm-hmm.
I think, so the minutes are January 14th, January 21, February 11th, and February 25th. I think I'll leave it to the experts in the House who might be lawyers. I don't think we're required to list the dates on the agenda, so I don't know if we should not approve the January 21st minutes and wait till a future agenda to post the date, or if you think we could go ahead and approve that date as well.
Let's live dangerously.
Which is which way?
Yeah.
Let's
Well, I think
approve
we've had some nitpicking about unimportant things on the agenda. So I think we'd probably be wiser to avoid the nitpick.
Right.
All right, so not living.
So moved.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will take a motion to approve the dates. So January 7th was already approved, so that's not a date. So we can approve January 14th.
14.
We can approve February 11th, and we can approve February 25th. We will not do January 21 because that's not on the agenda. So we'll do that next round.
Would you like those dates listed, each vote separately, or can we do them as in
I
total?
think we can do as one.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the Finance Committee for January 14th, February 11, and February 25 of 2025.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on those? Okay, I will go for a roll call. Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Al,
Al Lee's eye.
Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
and Karen Rouse, aye. Thank you. Okay, topics for next agenda. That is the warrant. That is our next agenda. So the warrant, all the warrant articles, which includes the budget. And I will do my best to invite Jim. So this way we can conclude. Do we want to do next week as the meeting, this 18th?
Madam Chair, I would very much request that the meeting be not next Tuesday. It can be a different day besides Tuesday or the 25th. That would be appreciated.
Mr. Morton, you're also unavailable next Tuesday,
That's
correct?
correct, yes.
Are you available the following week, you?
I think so. Let me just make sure now, having said that. Yes is the answer.
March 25th?
March 25th, does that work for everyone?
Okay with me.
Okay, so that hopefully we'll be able to wrap up a lot.
Wrap up
and
everything, yeah.
the expectation would be that we would vote on the warrant articles, which includes the budget. So as many as we can tackle on that night, then we'll be in pretty terrific shape. So we can pass along our recommendations to Jim so he can get it in the draft of the warrant for printing and everything. So that we'll be in terrific shape. Okay, the 25th. Thank you. Anything else anyone want to discuss before we call it?
Motion
All
to
right.
adjourn, motion
Thank
to
you.
adjourn.
Second,
Thank you. All right. Cindy,
Cindy Brown, aye.
Al,
Al Lee's eye.
Hugh,
Hugh Morton, aye.
Christopher,
Christopher Thrasher, aye.
terrific. Duncan,
Duncan Law, aye.
and Karen Ross, aye. Good night, everyone. Thank you
Night.
so much.